Welcome along. So, Champions League final and club season in the rear view mirror, albeit the Club World Cup is coming around the corner. There is a brief interlude for some international football. So, the women's national team rounded off their Nations League B2 campaign with the win in Cork last night, but ultimately they have the disappointment of second place behind Slovenia. This at a level they did completely dominate last time they were at it under Eileen Gleeson. So we'll chat to former Irish international Meabh De Burca and see what she has made of the Carla Ward regime thus far. There is also international football for the senior men's team. They have Senegal on Friday coming at the Aviva Stadium. And then on Tuesday they are away to Luxembourg. Dan McDonnell is here in studio. Daniel, hello.
Hello, Joe.
Our football coverage in association with Sky Sports, where you can experience more exclusive live sport than anywhere else, including at least 215 live Premier League games from next season. Every golf major, the Ryder Cup, every F1 race, the 2025 Lions Tour, and much more. Are you ready for 215 live Premier League games already next season? It's here.
215, yeah.
Oof.
We're into a World Cup year as well.
Well, this is the thing. So I guess Luxembourg away in particular, I mean Senegal, who are we to scoff at Senegal, who are 19th in the world, the second best African side after Morocco. This may not be the most glamorous doubleheader of all time. However, I think the context is we're here now. The World Cup qualifiers in September will be here when we blink. And September we're home to Hungary and away to Armenia. And it's a real sprint finish. October we're away to Portugal, home to Armenia, and then November, home to Portugal, away to Hungary. So in the space of September, October, November, 3 months, sprint finish. I mean, we're an important player or two to pick up an injury in late August, early September, and be out for 2 to 3 months. It would be cataclysmic. So the point here is this is a real last kind of a run-through for Heimir Hallgrímsson as we go for the big one.
I think when it became clear quite early in the Euro 2024 campaign that Ireland wouldn't qualify, I remember probably writing pieces at the time and talking about the fact that we are heading into a long period now without a really big international game. And I know there was a change of manager, but ultimately after Ireland lost that game in Greece in the summer of 24, it was over. I know summer 23, apologies, it was done. And yes, there were games against Holland later that year and France and so on, but we knew going into those games that was it. And yes, you had the Nations League games. They are important. We know, we've learned that they are important. But equally, I remember just making the point that this is the drift period for international football. I think we spoke about it here in one of your first shows about how, even from my perspective, just these international windows are like, God, this is actually a low-key fair. It's low-key break from the week-to-week sort of League of Ireland stuff, which has been way bigger in terms of like engagement and sort of interest and storylines and so on. But obviously that's going to change in a couple of months' time now, where all of a sudden, as you say, we're going to have this assault of like the 6 most important games that Ireland have played in some time. And because the group isn't terrifying on paper like the last one, because it starts with a double header, and just to remind people, I guess, at home to Hungary on a Saturday evening in September, like that's your main rival realistically in the group for the playoff spot. You watch the Champions League final, see a couple of Portuguese players involved. It's a little reminder, doing very well to finish ahead of them. But you realise that this is a very, you're right, like with Senegal, it's not to be disrespectful about them because they've got a really high calibre of player and they're far better than most European teams that Ireland will face. But still, it's low-key. Some players have been left behind. But I think the excitement is when the final whistle blows in Luxembourg next Tuesday evening, Ireland's the next time Ireland convene, this is for the proper business. This is potentially career generation defining for some of these players. So it's been a long wait for it, but it's coming.
Okay, so that's the prism through which we'll look at these two games. What do Uzbekistan, Qatar, Costa Rica, Mali and Venezuela have in common?
I'm guessing here, well, aside from probably trade links of some description in this changing world of ours, they also are probably ahead of Ireland or around Ireland in the world rankings, I'm guessing.
We are looking at them, up at them. They are bigger and better football nations than us.
Well, they also play, Qatar play around 50 games a year in the Asian Cup. They're playing the system better as well.
Okay.
Just going to get technical. If it's like the OWGR rankings or whatever, you can play them.
Or what are we, Brooks Koepka barely getting it up yet?
Yeah, we're not in the breakaway tour.
But it is staggering when you see the company that we're keeping. And it's a legacy of the last couple of years. Well, if you're of our generation and you sort of thought, we are kind of a decent, a top 30 in the world kind of a team maybe. So
that's
those Uzbekistanis,
Yeah.
I mentioned Senegal. They are 19th in the rankings, second best African side after Morocco. So they're on Friday night, and then Luxembourg on Tuesday. Can you give me sort of a bullet point answer on this, and then we'll get into some specifics? In terms of like Heimir Hallgrimsson, you've had these games to find your players, find your formation, get ready for this big September. Where is he along that journey? Is a lot of stuff fairly nailed down now to your eye? What do we have?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the most interesting aspect of this window was that he was confident. He felt confident enough to just leave most of the championship players at home, with the exception of Robbie Brady. He said he needed him because Ireland is very short of fullbacks, and that's the problem. And so he's come off his holidays from Preston. And Jason Knight and Max O'Leary, but they were in the playoffs with Bristol City, which is slightly different. So they haven't come off a 4-week break. He's felt confident enough to leave Josh Cullen on holidays, to leave Finn Azaz on holidays, to leave Mikey Johnston on holidays. And I think what I find about that is, I feel probably even with Stephen Kenny, I wonder would they have felt under pressure to almost get results in these games and to build confidence and have these, get your strongest team out even for these friendlies. But clearly they've looked at the past, that this June window has been bad for Ireland. But there's certainly a counterpoint would be that Ireland showed some signs of life in the Bulgaria games in March. And you could certainly argue, well, okay, Azaz was very good in those games. Would it be nice to see your best team again? He's talked about this continuity. He's constantly talked about wanting continuity, even though he's used loads of players. But, clearly he feels confident in himself that I can afford to leave some of these players away, which would suggest to me that he probably knows what he's doing in September. To me, that he has an idea what his team is going to be. And yes, we can talk about maybe one or two or three things that could be relevant this week, but I feel like he does probably know at this stage where he's going.
And who are his nailed-on guys, in your opinion, of that 11?
Yeah, so I think Kelleher is going to be the goalkeeper. I think that's pretty obvious, particularly now, like he's got the move to Brentford. The one question mark would have been if he hadn't played in at all in the English club season by the time the September games came around. I think Nathan Collins is always going to play. I think Robbie Brady is going to play at left back. And I think Matt Doherty is probably the first choice right full, because I don't think you can bank on Seamus Coleman anymore. Fortunately, he was meant to be here. He got injured. I'm sure if Seamus Coleman was there, I'm sure he would be a contender to play. I do think as well, before I move on, I think you can rattle through most of this team now. The one thing I would say, though, is that all of these qualifiers are like, Saturday, Tuesday, Friday, Monday. There are 2 games in 3 days. I think it's clear from watching him, he's not going to... There isn't a nailed 11 as such. I think it's like a nailed 14, if you know what I mean. I think there's going to be... And he's talked about this. I think certain games there'll be 2 strikers, certain games there'll be 1 striker and Azaz, I would say. So anyway, I think Nathan Collins, that's 3-year back 4. I think Collins, Doherty, Brady, and I think I'd find it hard to see Darragh O'Shea not playing. It's possible he could be a full back if he's not. In March against Bulgaria, Jacob Bryan played the second game and Darragh O'Shea played the first game. It's possible, again, Jacob Bryan has maybe won this week. Collins, O'Brien and O'Shea are all on duty. I mean, it's possible. It could be Darragh O'Shea at right back for a particular game. You want to be strong, and maybe you play Doherty in the game where you're going to be more attacking. That could be an angle. I think midfield then, I think Josh Cullen, you'd assume, will always play. I think Jason Knight probably as well. As a 2, I think Azaz probably ahead, and I think wide is the one where neither of them are here this week, and that's obviously an issue where they're going to be in September with injuries. I think if everyone was fit and all things being sort of no asterisks applied, I think it would probably Smodics and Chidozie Ogbene. and I think it's maybe one central striker for certain games. So I still think it probably will be Evan Ferguson, but obviously Troy Parrott was very good, and that's the thing. In certain games, could Parrott be out instead of Smodics? Could it be Parrott as a two strikers? But I think it's with that 11. I think it's you could have O'Brien coming into it at the back. You could have Parrott or Ferguson. I think Idah's more likely to be a sub in my view. And the other player I will mention, I think, is Will Smallbone, who I think is very relevant this week that he's here. Smallbone, I think, at times has played as a 10 for Ireland because we don't really have anyone else, with that attacking midfield skill set. Now Azaz has come along. So I wonder, like Smallbone, could Smallbone play ahead of Jason Knight at times, or could he be people say he could be the 6'8" or a 10 in modern football speak, he could be all of the above, and I think he's a genuine contender who just missed March. His Premier League season was ruined by injury, but last September it looked like Smallbone was going to be our guy, and so I think they are the contenders. Festi Ebisele, sure. Like Ogbene is coming back from a long-term injury. You can't be certain he'll be back in September. Mikey Johnston. So I think in the wide areas there's opportunities, but I'd be shocked if there was anyone outside of those players I've named starting against Hungary now. I think unless there's some kind of injury crisis.
As you say, that's your kind of 11 to 14.
I think so. Yeah.
Game dependent, opposition dependent.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah, I think the problem is I don't think they've ever all been available at one time. Sure. So it's the great hypothetical, and I think Smodics was ever present, and Kelleher, I think, in the Six Nations League games. Like Smodics has barely kicked the ball since, and I think it's clear he wants to play with a back four. I know that sometimes there can be fluid within the game, and sometimes it's like an attacking left back and there are
three
right back.
Three at the back in possession.
Yeah, like there's definitely
fine. Like that's a very modern thing.
Yeah,
Robbie Brady is not a left back, staying at home Giovanni Trapattoni style. Three at the back in possession, but like it's fluid but to be fair, you know what? It's not an uber complicated situation either. I mean, Robbie, you push on a bit there when we get the ball and everybody adjusts accordingly. They're all comfortable with that, I thought.
Yeah, and you just have to look at the games they're playing. This is it. Like, again, we're speaking in bigger picture about what's going to be, but what the games are. So it's a home to Hungary on a Saturday and away to Armenia in very warm weather on a Tuesday. So you almost probably have an idea in your head of how you need to approach those games, and it's like... then you head into November where it's Portugal away, and you can sort of feel, well, it's going to be, that could be the game where you could have a lot of centre halves on the pitch, for example.
Sure.
So we have an idea what to expect. I think there are questions around. I think the interesting elements of this week will be Ferguson and Parrott together. Will we see some of that? Is he willing to do that in the really big games, which obviously means then you lose. You risk being outnumbered in midfield, as we've seen at times has happened. There's a few other talking points like that.
Yeah. To jog memories from those Bulgaria games, the most recent games in March, which were Nations League playoff matches, Ireland went 1-0 down in both matches and then they came back to win 2-1 on both evenings. Second leg was in Dublin. It was a 4-2 aggregate win. Again, that whole 4 at the back out of possession, 3 at the back in possession pattern was fairly ensconced and evident, and it worked quite well. In terms of memories of those games, Troy Parrott was, I would say, exceptionally good. I don't want to go overboard, but when I say exceptionally good, he had a very nice assist away from home, but it was his general play, his movement was excellent, and his touch was uber reliable, uber sharp, clever passes. A lot of strikers don't have respect for possession. I think they should have to spend at least 3 years of their life in midfield chasing after the ball to understand how frustrating it can be for their teammates when they give it away too easily. But his touch was on point throughout. I thought he was really, really, really good. Bit of redemption from Matt Doherty was one of the other themes with the header in Bulgaria. And then I suppose Evan Ferguson, short on match time, short on fitness, not playing well, about to be taken off, I think, in Dublin, having missed a one-on-one chance where he took the shot too early, probably didn't back himself physically to pull away from chasing defenders and took the shot too early. But then on the hour mark, came deep, took the ball, played a 1-2, scored a great goal. We went, oh my God, this guy, the ceiling is so high. So they're my main memories of March. But generally kind of do you know what? Wow, they get to arrive into June having won 2 games in a row.
Yeah, I'd probably mention Finn Azaz as well. I think
Sorry,
that
away
was,
in particular, he was
yeah,
excellent. Yes.
yeah. I think Finn Azaz really announced himself
Yeah.
in that window. And yeah, Parrott. Yeah, no, you're probably right. And look, even I can imagine even listening back to myself. Maybe I'm wrong to say that Parrott won't start. It may well be that Parrott is a first choice player now, and I think certainly I do think Heimir is very much about the team rather than the individuals, and I think probably he can see what Parrott brings to a team, and the fact that he was selected away from home ahead of Ferguson, and I thought that Ferguson would play. So, like, you look at the shape of September, and I'm naturally jumping to September again because these are the games that really matter. That do you feel that at home against Hungary in Dublin, you have to really go, well, this is the game. Ireland have to win. I feel Ireland have to win that game. They've started so many groups badly and chased and been on the back foot. I just feel for the psychology of the group, Ireland need to win that game. So is that the game where you play Ferguson and Parrott and then it's Armenia on Tuesday? You go for the more patient Azaz linking up, play in the heat and maybe, keep the ball a bit better and, it may well be that it's that. And I kind of wonder on Friday against Senegal, to bring it back to this week here, albeit there are some cogs in the wheel are missing, but I kind of wonder is a sense of, okay, can we sort of go toe to toe with a strong side, but can we play those guys again? And I appreciate you don't have every combination there, but do you go with a sort of an attacking, whatever you want to call it, 4-4-2 or 4-2-3-1? Because that was the thing about Ferguson, even when he scored the goal against Bulgaria, like there was changes made and you thought Ferguson would be going to him and he wasn't. Like he came from deep, and that's the thing. Like, is Ferguson actually going to end up playing as a number 10 at times?
Well, let's stick on Ferguson and I have a few names to throw at you, different press conferences this week or things going on. So much like was the case in March, Ferguson is still short on game time. It's been a fairly unhappy stint at West Ham, you'd have to say, despite big expectations when he went. He's made just one start, hasn't scored, was whipped up at half-time when he did start, you remember. So John O'Shea talking after the training session yesterday was saying he looked really good, strength, physicality, technical ability, never in doubt, trained really well. And he's going to have to, Premier League, it's competitive. So what is his situation now from a club point of view, with the view to where he'll pitch up in August ahead of that September? Is he back to Brighton or is it?
Yeah. Like he's on a long-term deal at Brighton. I mean, that's the thing. Like,
there's no sense of West Ham saying give us another year.
No. I think that one's dead. And look, I probably called that one wrong. I thought it was a good fit for him, but it wasn't.
Well, it looked a good fit. Graham Potter. West Ham.
It made a lot of sense. But he probably had options in like Leverkusen was an option and. Yeah, I look, maybe it's not a case that the move was wrong. It's that he didn't do enough with it. Maybe it was the right move and he didn't seize the moment. Like, you can't all pin it on the club. Like, you have to sort of pin it on the player as well. Maybe he just didn't capitalise on the opportunity because Fulkrug was injured. If he was doing well enough, I'm sure he would have played more. But then when it came to the end, once he's not your player, it's not West Ham's job to build your confidence or to build your minutes. No, he's not yours.
He had to start well there,
to protect his value. But yeah, he's signed a couple of long-term deals with a view to the fattening of the calf. That was the thing. So I think he's under contract till, off the top of my head, I think it's 2029. I feel like it's a long-term deal anyway. So he'll go back there. He didn't have a pre-season under Herzler last season because he was injured. So I guess he has to report back for duty there whenever it is, late June, July, and set about proving people wrong. Or I guess it may well be that he'll be sold for way less than what people would have imagined he would have been sold for 18 months ago. I know Brighton have seemed to have interest in some of their players, so he's just caught in a holding pattern here with other players, and he just needs to be injury free, turn up for pre-season, and I suppose just be in contention for Brighton from the start. Maybe someone will come in now and just make a move for him anyway, from elsewhere, but there's no doubt, people waiting to the clubs here and stuff, hoping for a big sell-on clause. They might want him to go back to Brighton and maybe get his value back up again. The hope was at West Ham he would regain his value, and it just didn't happen.
No. Adam Idah talking to the press this week. So With Celtic this season, 58 appearances, 21 goals. He has scored 6 in his last 7, scored in 5 games in a row. Then there was that leaked video of him appearing to vomit in the back of a taxi. Brendan Rodgers, to be fair, jumped to his defence, so he was speaking about this, about all that this week. You know, the fishbowl that is Glasgow. It didn't impact me, he says of the video. I was out on a day off. That was that. Brendan Rodgers understood that. I was off. I go out with the boys. That was it. There was no problem with the manager. He spoke about it really well. I'm a human being. I go out. I don't have to stay inside all the time. It's hard when people are videoing you. It can be quite upsetting, especially when the story is made out to be what it's not. So that was that. And then obviously at Celtic, there's the fishbowl aspect. And there's also fairly healthy media scrutiny in Glasgow. And you've got the John Hartsons and Chris Suttons very much on the circuit. If you don't score or you go a couple of games, it is not helpful to listen to an ex-player. I'd say that is true. I had a good run in the last few games, but I know it can turn quick. He must be feeling pretty okay, though. 21 goals?
Yeah, I know. I liked his answer. I was at his press conference where he spoke. I liked his answer about the social stuff. I think he's dead right. Like, he's 24 years of age. Like, he's entitled to...
The amount of taxis you puked in at 24 years of age. I mean, unbelievable.
I just waited till I got home. That was the decent way to do it. But, you know, and Celtic is particular like that. There's that element of, I think it can be stifling. Like, so many players at clubs in England don't live in the city in which they play, you know, for good reason, unless it's London or Manchester where you can be relatively anonymous. But a lot of the Celtic lads just end up in Glasgow, and it's not that they do more of it than people anywhere else. It's just they seem to get spotted more if they do. So I totally empathise with that. Like, he 21 goals is a very impressive figure. You step back from it. I'm sure if we got Celtic fans into a room here and asked, you know, their views on Idah, you'd get a real mixed version of opinions. I think at times this season he's come in for a lot of criticism. Even he scored a goal against Bulgaria in Ireland's last game. He was cupping his ears to the fans after because of criticism he's received. So I think he receives a fair bit of it. Look, he's young, he's on social media. When Johnny Kenny came on the scene in January, who was very unknown to Celtic fans, you'd see a lot of people saying, well, he has to be better than Idah. Like, that's almost the sense of, like, when he went there, he was perceived as a cheap arrival in a window where he didn't spend big. And as a result, at times he's been a little bit of a punch bag, I feel. Now, I've watched a fair bit of him. Like, he does come on at times in games and score goals against weak enough sides, so you can maybe boost your stats with that. But the flip side is he also has scored in big Old Firm matches as well too. And I think there's probably a real character building aspect of what he's going through at the moment. So I mean, sometimes his demeanour can annoy people, but in some ways I like his honesty.
Spikiness.
Yeah.
Indo Sport Podcast at independent.ie if you have videos of Dan puking in a taxi. Jason Knight, just worth a mention. Aidan Fitzmaurice in the paper was writing about him. I kind of hadn't clocked this. I mean, I guess this squad is not your typical squad, but he's probably up there nonetheless. So aside from Matt Doherty and Robbie Brady, 24-year-old Jason Knight, the third most experienced member of the squad with 37 caps. I still feel like I'm getting to know young Jason Knight. And here he is, the third most experienced member of this squad. For his season, played every minute of every league game for Bristol City in the Championship. Just 3 outfield players managed that in the Championship. Like, that is a slog of a league. That is no joke to do that in the Championship. Games every 2-3 days. So he is durable. He's their captain. Played 57 times for the club in total, all competitions. And obviously they got to the playoffs and Sheffield United beat them well. I guess there is some talk as to whether they will sell him. Some Premier League interest, perhaps, maybe. The sweet spot for Bristol City is they only paid Derby, who were in financial trouble at the time, £3 million for him. So they're going to make a profit whenever they do. Are you hearing any great concrete rumours of Premier League interest or no?
No, there has been across his career, and there were times in the past where it looked like there might be. Now, he won all the rewards this season. Like, he was player of the season, he was fans player of the season. I watched a bit of their last day of the Championship where they were chasing the points to get into the playoffs, and he was a big player for them on the pitch. A lot was going through him, you know. So I'm sure there is Premier League interest. I don't think there's anything. I'm not aware of anything like this is happening, that level of thing. But it looks like their manager's moving on as well, Liam Manning. So Norwich, I'm not sure if that's gone through, but certainly that was That's been the big story, and they are a club that gets plundered, so they are sort of a selling club. I would think he's at the stage now where he's almost achieved everything he can do in the championship. But sometimes for those players, they can get pigeonholed in that championship bracket, and the easiest way to get to the Premier League is to get promoted with a team. So is it a case that he becomes a target for one of the teams coming down? That he becomes he makes the move that way, but he has to be knocking on the door. Like I think
he doesn't. See, I only really see him for Ireland.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, quite a few of our players is the reality of how often I see them. I think he's a very useful player for us. He's industrious. He works hard. He can go by a player in a sneaky way here and there. He doesn't jump off the page to me as a Premier League starter necessarily. And him playing 60 games at a good competitive championship side and being captain might actually be better for us, selfishly, than going and kicking his heels on a Premier League bench at a Brentford type club. You know what I mean?
But it depends where I don't know. Like you had this thing where Ogbene went. A lot of people probably would have maybe had that view of Ogbene, and then he went up to the Premier League, and he was really well suited to playing with a lower Premier League side. I think Jason Knight has played his best football for Ireland in games, and this sounds disparaging, but in games where his work off the ball is the premium. Like sometimes he's a very effective player, sort of, in terms of pressing. Maybe sometimes even at times he's been playing high up the park, but he's been useful in terms of that. Watching him at Bristol City a little bit on the run-in, like he's more involved in terms of on the ball and threading a couple of passes, but it may well be that he could jump up the Premier League to play with a struggling side, the team that needs that work rate from their midfielder. I do get the point you're making, and this is the thing with some of the Irish players sometimes, is that you have some like exceptional like professionals, really good professionals, but maybe their skill set doesn't transfer over to the international game where you want them to boss a game against a slightly different tempo of game. I think sometimes in our squad at the moment, we have some really good championship players and lower half Premier players, but you might actually find yourself playing against Greece then, and you have guys who might be playing at maybe not as an intense a level of football, but they can control the tempo of a game.
Yeah.
That they are. Baziketas, who played for Greece, and guys like Jason Knight, I'm sure, is playing in a league where the wages are bigger and probably is earning very, very good money relative to a lot of these guys. But that's why there's a lot of excitement around maybe someone like Azaz, and why someone is looking for a small bone to come along, that more technical midfielder that no doubt it's a weakness that Ireland possess.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, by the way, that's just a hunch. I mean, I don't see him.
I think he probably could. I think he could, but it may well be in that
fighting hard.
Yeah.
Caoimhin Kelleher, we don't need to dwell on. We've talked about it. He's made his move. He's gone to Brentford, 21 million. He'll be a starter, so that is box ticked, and that's a very positive move for him and for Ringmahon Rangers. 3 million in the bank. That would be very nice. Josh Honohan, we should touch on. So he's been called up to the squad by Heimir Hallgrimsson, who's League of Ireland's most devoted fan at this stage. Can't see a game without Heimir turning up. So why has he picked Honohan? And then secondly, your interpretation of Stephen Bradley's public comments about Honohan on what is, a big week in his life. So they drew 0-0 at Tallaght Stadium against Galway, and Bradley said publicly he was awful. That's the worst I've seen Josh, the worst I've ever seen him. Extremely poor. Not nice to be taken off. He's been brilliant for us. He's obviously got the call-up, deserved it, doing great, well done. But tonight, a million miles off what he's been in every aspect. It's not good enough. That struck people as an overly harsh public way to send Josh Honohan into a very important big week in his life. Invariably, he gets asked about it then when he's doing media in what should be a fairly feel-good press conference and a celebratory one. Stephen Bradley can say what he wants to Josh Honohan privately, of course. The decision to go public, what did you make of that?
Yeah, no, I think it definitely raised a lot of eyebrows for sure. To go back to your initial question, why did he pick Honohan? The thing is, the information would be that when Bradley and Heimir met for their chat, look, I think a big part of it was Bradley talking about trusting Honohan. I think Bradley has been his biggest advocate in terms of he's driven the argument to say, no, this guy physically has all the elite attributes to step up, and he should be considered. And I think that's a point that he's made strongly to Hal Grimson. So you kind of wonder what's the power dynamic here? Like, is there a sense of, did he feel that once he got the call that he dropped off a little bit, and you feel maybe because you have such credit in the bank with someone, and they are viewed as having a decent relationship, and there's certainly there would be a view that Honohan has gone to another level under Bradley's tutelage at Rovers, that maybe with that you feel like you can give them the public kick, But I take your point. Like, it's attracted a lot of comment where it's like, I think there's a difference between saying, and this sometimes Bradley can just be very forthright, he didn't have his best game. Look at Josh struggled today. That doesn't get as many headlines as he was awful. Like, it's a phrase you very rarely hear a manager use about their own player in any situation. But I don't know. I'm guessing there has to be something behind it. Did he feel, that during the week, or he didn't like something he saw during the week? And I guess, look, if you're Josh Honohan, like, this could be the biggest week of your life, maybe. And maybe does he feel he needs to be reminded just not to be switched off here, because like Rovers are in a really big time in their season. But the severity of it definitely would be a little bit surprising. Honan then came out and spoke about it. I thought he spoke about it pretty well.
Yeah,
he's a very mature fella. But I saw Richard Howell was critical of it, and we make the point, like, you feel like as a manager, players will look at it. If you're giving it to a player who has a reputation for being a bad trainer or something, that's fine. But Josh doesn't have that.
Right.
But I'm looking forward to seeing how I'd imagine he'll get a cap. I wonder, would it be more likely in Luxembourg than at home to Senegal? But there is no doubt that there is an expectation that Honan will probably move, if not this summer, and I'd say this summer is a possibility, probably next winter. He's a very versatile player. He can use both feet. He can play left wing back, right wing back. I think with Ireland, he's probably an option at left back or right back. He's 24. The Irish fullbacks at the moment are Robbie Brady, Matt Doherty, Seamus Coleman, or converted centre half. So the lads in their 30s. Ryan Manning, is there as well. But there's a real opportunity for a fullback to make their case. It's a position where it's a great position to be coming along in, and Josh is 24, so if he can use this, not to use the phrase, he can use this for a career change, you get in trouble. But I do think, for all that the kerfuffle about that, I think Stephen Bradley has spoken about, he probably expects Josh Honan to move at some stage. That's part of the plan. And I'll be interested to hear what the reports were from other players of him in the camp, because I think there's no doubt sometimes you have these players from the league who are called up, maybe like Jack Byrne, and they're technically very good, or Graham Burke, but maybe the question would be, it's that tempo, it's maybe the athleticism, and it's the physicality. I think Josh is maybe the opposite, that he has a lot of those attributes. I've seen it in Europe, playing even against Chelsea and Vienna and these teams. He can look after himself. There's no issue in that front. It's probably the tactical piece that's more of a question.
Okay. So I guess that sets up the international break. We'll catch up next week, obviously, just before we chat to Meabh De Burca about the women's national team. We haven't spoken in a few weeks. There was a great sense at the start of this League of Ireland season that this was really hard to call. Shelburne started with a real intensity on opening night, and you thought, okay, they're back on it again in a big way. Pats looked very intriguing to a lot of people. Rovers, we didn't know. We know now, I think. They're looking ominously in control of the situation.
No, they are. Yeah, no, they have 5 games in 14 days coming out of the break, so it's funny, like, when like a lot of the club season in Ireland really heats up now. Like, the period either side of the break.
Got shells early on.
Yeah, and then they 5 again. Then you've got Europe. Then they don't play in the league. The European teams barely play in the league in July. It's weird because they're into the European run. So
yeah, there is a cadence to the league that takes a bit of getting used
to.
It's
a weird time of the year. You've 24 games before July in some cases, and then you hardly play a league game after. And that's what Shells last year. They haven't won a game in months, but they've only played maybe 4 league games. But to go back to it, like Rovers, and maybe that was just obviously staring in the face. When you think about it, like, they've been the dominant team.
Phil, you tipped Pats.
I did,
yeah.
And then and I'll be honest, after a couple of weeks, I started thinking, I like the look of Shells here.
Yeah.
they're on it. Now, I did eventually come round to the Rovers thing going, oh, actually, this is looking a bit obvious.
When they went 5 points clear in the league.
But you know, when you think about it now, Rovers played such a high level in Europe. Like the levels they hit in some of those European games were really good. And yes, I think probably overreacted to the loss of Johnny Kenny and Ferrugia. Thinking, okay, you take Johnny Kenny's 20 goals or so out of the team. They didn't replace him, but probably didn't bank on Michael Noonan coming along and doing it. Like, he scored big goals, like he's 16. Like, there's a lot of excitement to be generated from that. But you look at the depth of their squad. Jack Byrne has come back, and all of a sudden he looks like Jack Byrne again.
Yeah.
And that he'd gone last year. You know, he wasn't on the premises. He barely played in that European run. So you look at it now. Pats haven't played well. Shells have actually played well at times, but just a lot of 75-80% possession in games and no end product. Yeah, Roberts had a bad season last year, and they were champions with 5 minutes to go. And I wouldn't say it's done and dusted, because they head into this period, and then they've got Europe, where it's weird, they are the highest ranked team in the first round of the Conference League in the entire competition, and they are guaranteed to be seeded in all 4 rounds of the Conference League playoffs. Now, they could get some very difficult teams in round 2 or 3, but it's mad the teams that they're ranked higher than. So they have a chance at that, so that could always be distracting.
Sure.
But yeah, it does look like it's more the game against Pats when they beat them 4-0. Some of the passing patterns and stuff they put together, you're like, yeah, this is a level above everyone else.